The rain drummed steadily against the windshield, streaking across the glass in erratic patterns as I navigated the winding road. The night had swallowed the countryside in inky darkness, save for the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance. I wasn't in the habit of picking up strangers, but when my beams illuminated a lone figure standing on the roadside, drenched and shivering, something in my gut told me to stop. I slowed to a crawl, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. The man turned toward me, shielding his face from the downpour. He was young, mid-20s, maybe tall, with sharp features and dark eyes that held a quiet desperation. His clothes clung to him, soaked through, and his breath came in short, visible puffs in the cold night air. "Need a ride?" I called through the cracked window. Relief flickered across his face as he nodded. Yeah, that'd be great. My car broke down a few miles back." His voice was smooth, warm despite the chill in the air. I unlocked the door, and he slid into the passenger seat, exhaling sharply as he pushed wet strands of hair from his forehead. The scent of rain and worn leather filled the car. I glanced at him. His jaw was tense, his fingers twitching slightly. Whether from cold or something else, I wasn't sure. "Where you headed?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. "Home," he said vaguely, then hesitated. "Well, not exactly. I was visiting my mother. She's sick." Something about the pause in his voice made me glance at him again. His eyes were focused on the road ahead, but his shoulders slumped slightly, as if carrying an unseen weight. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. He offered a small smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks. I appreciate the ride. Been out here for a while." I nodded, letting the silence settle between us, broken only by the rhythmic swish of the wipers. There was something oddly intimate about the moment. Two strangers trapped in the same space, sharing the quiet hum of the engine, the occasional flicker of lightning illuminating the road. After a few minutes, he shifted slightly in his seat. "I'm Daniel, by the way." I introduced myself, and he nodded as if rolling the name around in his mind. "So, do you always pick up strangers in the middle of the night?" he asked, a teasing lilt in his voice. I huffed a laugh. "Not usually, but you look like you could use a little luck." "Guess I'm lucky then." He smiled, this time more genuine. I couldn't deny it. There was something disarming about him. Maybe it was the way his voice softened when he spoke, or how he seemed to study me as if trying to unravel a mystery. The road stretched ahead, endless and dark. And though I didn't know it then, this chance encounter was about to change everything. The rain hadn't let up by the time I pulled into Daniel's driveway. His house sat at the end of a quiet street, a modest structure with a dim porch light flickering against the storm. I hesitated, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. "You sure you'll be okay from here?" I asked. Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt, but didn't move to leave. Instead, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Look, I know this is weird. We just met and all, but would you want to come in for a bit? Just until the rain eases up?" I should have said no. I didn't make a habit of lingering with strangers, but something about Daniel made hesitation feel unnecessary. Maybe it was the way his voice dipped slightly, low and inviting. Maybe it was the unspoken sadness lingering in his eyes. I exhaled, nodding. "Sure, just for a little while." Inside, the house was warm, cozy even. The scent of cedar and something faintly sweet hung in the air. Daniel tossed his wet jacket over a chair and ran a hand through his damp hair. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, moving toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Yeah, that'd be great." I sank onto the couch, taking in my surroundings. The space felt lived in, books stacked haphazardly on a shelf, a worn guitar resting in the corner, a candle flickering on the coffee table. It was a glimpse into Daniel's world, and I found myself wanting to know more. He returned moments later, handing me a steaming mug before sitting across from me. "So," he said, studying me over the rim of his cup, "what's your story?" I chuckled. "That's a broad question. All right then, let's narrow it down. Why'd you stop for me tonight?" I considered the question. "I don't know. Instinct, maybe. You looked like you needed a break." Daniel smirked. "I did." His fingers tapped idly against the side of his mug. And maybe I needed to meet you too. Something in his voice sent a ripple through me. A pause stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. The storm outside raged on, but inside, there was only the quiet tension of two people on the precipice of something unexpected. Daniel set his cup down, leaning slightly forward. You ever meet someone and feel like you were supposed to cross paths? His gaze held mine, steady and searching. My pulse quickened, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe, I admitted. His lips curved into the smallest smile. Maybe, he echoed. The moment hovered, delicate and charged. And though I couldn't quite place it, a part of me knew. This was the beginning of something. I just didn't know yet whether it would be the best thing that ever happened to me, or the worst. The days that followed felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. Daniel and I texted constantly, our conversations stretching late into the night. We met up for coffee, for walks, for long drives where neither of us said much, but the silence between us felt like its own language. It was new, intoxicating, and yet something about it felt fragile, like a thread stretched too thin. It wasn't until a week later that the first crack appeared. Daniel had invited me over for dinner, promising something simple but impressive. I had just parked outside his house when my phone buzzed with a message. Can't tonight. Something came up. Sorry. I stared at the screen, an unease settling deep in my gut. No explanation. No promise to reschedule. Just an abrupt dismissal. I almost let it go. Almost. But something about the way he had been lately, his moments of hesitation, the way he sometimes seemed lost in thought, made me feel like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. So I stayed. The lights inside his house were off, but just as I was about to leave, movement caught my eye. A figure stood near the porch, their back to me. A woman. She knocked, shifting her weight impatiently. And then the door opened. Daniel stepped out, silhouetted against the faint glow from inside. Even in the dim light, I could see the tension in his posture. I cracked my window, straining to hear. You weren't answering my calls, the woman said, her voice sharp. Daniel sighed. I told you I needed space. Space, she scoffed. So you ghost me for weeks. And now I find out from someone else that you've been. She stopped short, her voice breaking. Is there someone else? My breath hitched. Daniel ran a hand down his face. It's complicated. A hollow ache spread through my chest. I didn't need to hear any more. I drove away before he could see me, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My mind reeled, replaying every moment, every word, every lingering glance that now felt tainted. Had I been a fool? The answer came in the form of a single truth, sharp and unforgiving. I was never the only one. And Daniel, he wasn't the man I thought he was. The betrayal sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and unmoving. I spent the night replaying everything, every glance, every word, every moment that now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. Daniel had made me feel special, like we had stumbled upon something rare. But in reality, I was just another name on his list, another person caught in his web of half-truths. I wanted answers. I wanted him to look me in the eye and tell me why. But I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, a message lit up my phone. Can we talk? Please. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting him sit in the silence he had once given me. But I needed closure. We met at a small cafe, the air between us thick with unspoken tension. Daniel looked tired, his usual confidence replaced with something closer to regret. He stirred his coffee, not meeting my gaze. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said finally. I exhaled a bitter laugh. That's the thing about hurting people, Daniel. You don't get to decide if you did. He flinched. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then how was it supposed to be? I leaned forward, my voice steadier than I felt. Was I just a distraction? A game? His jaw tightened. No. I meant what I said. I felt something real with you. I studied him, searching for the truth. Maybe he believed that. Maybe, in his own selfish way, he had convinced himself this wasn't as cruel as it was. But it didn't change the reality. He had lied. He had let me believe I was the only one when I never was. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table. I hope you figure yourself out, Daniel. But I won't be part of it. As I walked away, I felt the weight of him watching me, but I didn't look back. Days passed, and the ache lessened. It didn't vanish overnight, but slowly, I found myself laughing again, breathing without the heaviness of betrayal pressing down on me. And then, in an unexpected twist, karma delivered its final blow. A message popped up from an unknown number. Hey, you don't know me, but I think we've both been played by the same man. Daniel's other partner. We met, exchanged stories, and pieced together the pattern. How he had juggled us both, how his charm had masked the manipulation. And in the end, we made sure he knew he had lost us both. Daniel was left with nothing. And as I stood in the rain one evening, feeling the drops against my skin, I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had learned. I wouldn't let someone like Daniel break me again.